Thank you very much. We'll now return to item 14, and there's been an opportunity to think through an alternative approach to the planter boxes, and so I'll just hand over to Pauline, who's moving a resolution. I'm withdrawing mine with the agreement of the seconder. So, Pauline.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. And thinking about this more carefully, it's actually a roading issue, which makes it a bit of a city roading issue. And you'll note the report has actually been signed by the team leader of the road maintenance team. And so it's a bigger issue than the community board. And I think it sits probably with the Transport Committee, who will, fortunately, the chair is also on that community board, so he'll make sure that this doesn't get dropped and have it addressed through that committee as part of a roading repair. And so I'm happy with that. And I think the reason that the board brought this to in this way is because it has been lingering around for nudging 9 years now. And it has been to council before, but buried within the reports of the community board without actually any actions being picked up. It's been put in the too hard basket, and the more time that progresses, the worse condition this situation is getting into, and possibly the dearer it will be to mitigate. So, Mike's happy to receive this at his committee, and I think that's the best way forward for this today.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. I'll put the motion. Debate?
Can we ask questions? Yeah.
Oh, staff, yeah, can't have to come to the table.
Just, given this, I presume this is like a subdivision consenting kind of arrangement where we inherit these sorts of infrastructure. Have we looked at our infrastructure design standards and looked at amendments to ensure that we're getting sort of decent quality infrastructure that's not going to deteriorate?
Yeah, I mean, this was a legacy over 20 years ago, and we are reviewing the infrastructure design standards currently to make sure that they are appropriate, and obviously we don't get these issues coming forward. We'll also need to speak to the subdivisions team to make sure that they're aware that they don't inherit these things, and or if they are going to be built, that they are maintained in a way where the council doesn't take on liability, agreement or kind of easement, for example.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Tim and then Aaron.
I take it that review will probably go to Mike's committee rather than come back to full council. Would that be right? If you're looking at, because I mean it's not just this planter boxes. I mean I use the example of Northwood's Stonehenge. You know, these things are right across the city, and we do have to kind of. I prefer to see minimalist rather than cost. You know, we just don't have the money. So would that be coming to the Transport Committee if it's a roading issue, as we've just been told?
Urban development and transport. Yeah.
The IDS, you've given delegations to make minor updates because we're updating them all the time, and we report back to you, I think, once a year or once every 18 months about those changes and recommendation for minor changes. So bigger changes would come back there, but basically those standards are being altered as new materials come and leave the market.
So
all
Dave's
the time.
talking about the infrastructure design standards.
Correct.
But I think Tim's talking about a different thing.
I'm talking about the icing on the cake that say perhaps a developer might call it, like the planter boxes, which look pretty, but it's like artwork, you know, like some time ago we talked about what is the maintenance, and that had never been taken, and we just get these gifts and they turn out to be Trojan horses.
You're talking about the nice to have, not the
It's
need
the
to
gift
have.
that keeps on giving. Yeah.
We are $2.1 billion in the poo. We've got to really start getting hard. That's all I'm saying.
And we're bringing that up through ELT,
Right.
and then it'll come up to the appropriate committee because it's more than it covers assets on parks and all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So there's a number of areas. Yeah. So we'll bring it up to the right committee once it's gone through ELT.
Yeah,
Sometimes
I
it's better
think
not
the
to get a
point that
gift.
Tim's raising is actually an extremely good one,
It
which is that
Thank you.
you know, we don't want to inherit after the fact the sort of the ongoing cost without having considered that at the front end of the process.
And
Sometimes
Mark also raises that some of them are unsafe. We actually wouldn't build them on our road reserve because they're not, if you hit them, they are probably stronger than your car. And so, you know, there are a number of issues with quite a number, but appreciate they've been put in over the last probably century, probably.
I'm just saying we've got to stop it, and it'd be sometimes it's better not to receive a gift than to receive it.
Yeah, and
So
the
we-
issue
we-
does. Sorry.
Members, we hear what you're saying, and we will make sure we consider that in terms of the information coming forward to you.
Aaron?
Yeah, so in the options, I didn't see an option for removing the box off the side, lifting the tree out of the hole, because it was a transplanted tree anyway, and then just digging the hole deeper and dropping the tree back in so it's no longer in a box, it's ground level.
But there was an option 5, I believe, to remove the tree entirely, but I don't know if we actually did talk about transplanting it.
Yeah, not
No.
remove it entirely, because then it wouldn't be palm dry,
Maybe
it would
not.
just be...
Covered in the
It
report,
would
but I
be.
believe the arborist did suggest that the tree health would suffer if it was transplanted, because they've got such shallow roots.
But it was a transplanted tree anyway. Is there a limit to how many times?
Been there for another 20 years on there, and I think the advice was that it was not going to cost any less than what the cost is. because you
Yeah,
have to-
well,
Yeah, but the
my
point
one of
was-
the reasons for the transfer is actually to look at the costs. I think that there's possibly other options for resolving this, Aaron. I think you're right. We need to look at the options.
No, that's small plants, Mike, it's not the tree back.
But the best place to refer this is not for us to make a decision on whether this is the right approach or not. The best place is to refer it to Mike's committee, which we're all
You
on.
can then all talk about it.
Yeah.
Anne?
Thank you. Just, I have a similar issue in Westmoreland actually, where developers put in bollards and things that are breaking down. So what's the best process? Is this the best process in terms of bringing that to council as an issue to deal with, or is it best to go through the community board? Yeah. So will the report that comes back to us outline a process that's best to deal with these
We
things?
will look at all those permutations and things that are causing us problems, bring it up through ELT and then back to the appropriate committee. Because there's also some of the things that people do like to put some kind of character on this area. We don't want to actually have I don't think we want to have every subdivision looking absolutely the same, Coronation Street in boxes kind of thing. Sorry, Coronation Street fans.
Aaron?
So-
I think the issue goes wider as well in terms of new subdivisions. Obviously, are trying to sell a product, and they do put the roads in asphalt and concrete footpaths.
Well,
and we
costs
know
should
that
lie
that's
where they
class standards
fall.
and that's-
Yes, we are.
Aaron?
So then the other question of it kind of going through a convoluted process of an annual plan, a long-term plan, so on and so forth, is there not $40,000 in the repairs budget for roads and gutters and everything else that can just get this job done, Dave? I mean, you must have a scope of, jeepers, that's come up this year, we'll fix that. You must have that budget.
Can we refer this to the relevant committee for
Right.
those things to be considered? Because
Yeah, black box.
yeah, thank you. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you, and thank you, Pauline. That's very helpful resolution. That saved a debate. No. What will come through is a different approach, I believe. Anyway, Awatea Road, Cars Road intersection improvements. This has come through with the recommendation from the community board, and so who would
Move.
happy to move?
Yes.
Seconded, Jimmy Chen. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. And similarly, Walmari Road, Pearce Street to Maidstone Road, road marking upgrade, proposed by the Hallsville Hornby Rickerton Community Board.
Yeah.
Do you move it? You
Yeah,
move
I'll
it.
second
Jimmy
it.
Chen, seconded Anne Galloway. Any discussion? Yes? A question for staff?
Come on, guys, wake up.
Oh.
All right.
How many car parks are we doing with Ribbon? I can say that again for Jamie's benefit. How many car parks are we
Yeah.
removing?
Can I?
They were looking to I know, I'm sorry, I don't know it off the top of my head, and we've got staff way sick and that sort of thing today, apologies. I know they were aiming to minimise the amount of car parking removal, and it has only been at safety and, intersections, and otherwise we would lost it. But just let me have a quick check, sorry. I read it somewhere. Oh, I'm sorry, I will have to come back to you on that one. To keep it moving.
Well, they're gonna come back before we get to the debate. Yeah, Yanni and Melanie.
I
Right.
was just, thank you. I was just under 6.3. It said there'd been 4 crashes involving cyclists in the area since 2011. That would seem quite a low number, but I do note that it does say that there's an increase in the number of cyclists. Do we know what the cause of those crashes were?
The staff will that have done the design, but I don't off the top of my head, apologies.
Okay.
They were.
And is that at a high level? Is that like a sort of normal number that would generate a safety improvement, or is that quite a low number?
We have been looking across the program, and particularly across our resurfacing program, and across the wider network to understand where there is increased usage and where we can make improvements. So the safety improvement is about defining space on the road, in the road corridor for cyclists. And we are looking to align that with our resurfacing program so that when we resurface, we can remark newly and it's all done in one hit. So this is about us getting ahead of that. As opposed to necessarily there being a real hotspot that we're trying to address.
So, Anne, did you have a question?
No, I had a comment.
So, well, no, it was a unanimous decision of the community board. So, I'd like to hear.
No, I can't.
Sorry?
I can comment on the car parks if you like from a personal experience.
Yeah, and I can't answer it. Absolutely.
I've asked for clarification from the staff, so hopefully they can pick up.
Page 106, I think it's one that says available spaces between activity spaces which people...
28 to 13.
Yes, it did look.
Yeah.
I know I should do these documents.
Yeah, I can remember that.
106.
There seemed to be a lot of community support for the change as well.
Yes, because the surrounding area are kind of, the uni student live in those surrounding area, and also quite a few the uni student they like to,
So
for the bike,
Okay.
etc. Yeah.
Question 3, answer A3. It says in there, it's about reducing queue lengths of also causing problems, and answer AC says alternatively car parks can be converted into parallel spaces, but this would reduce the available spaces from 28 to 13. But I think that's just on Dovedale.
Yeah, that's not the main.
No, it's not the one. Sorry. But there wasn't kickback from the community. A lot of the car parks that are retained are being converted to 120s, which assists the community as well, the residents in the area.
So,
So I can't answer the question.
is this core critical to your vote?
Well, I don't know. It's probably judging the room, it probably isn't going to change the outcome anyway, but that's fine. I just thought we'd know. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. So, Melanie? Yep, debate.
I'm fully supportive of this, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. I had this is personal, but I had a tutor use one of my 3 smart cars I used to have, and she parked it out on Walmari Road between Pearce Street and Dovedale, and it was hit by a stolen vehicle, turned around 180 and written off. And it's exactly where those yellow lines are going to go, so I think it's completely brilliant. So good on you.
Aaron?
Well, I'll definitely support this if it's going to stop vehicles being stolen.
Hey, come on, we either debate or we debate.
Yeah. My only concern around this is the parking on the street there on Walmari Road down towards the grounds for playing sport. I remember parking down there heaps, and you used to be able to park where you'd pull off just before the bend there. All that grassed area used to be parking on a Saturday when you played rugby, football and hockey down there. You wouldn't play all 3 in the same day unless you were like Mike, but normally you'd only play one. But that was full, and now that's full of accommodation, and the street's normally full. So where did they all go now? They bike to the game. You'll be naked.
This is a debate.
Yeah, that was a
rhetorical question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
to my fellow members to think about their decision.
Yeah.
Those sport, but sport's not important.
Anyone else, Tim?
Yeah, look, thank you to the staff for this, and I think with regards to your comment, that was buy-in from the locals. So whether you have visitors coming into your community, well, that's all lovely, but it's actually about the locals and about the people that live there. So if they're really onto this and they see the advantages to it, then good on them, and well done.
Right, I'll put the motion. Oh, Catherine?
I'll just ask people to support it. This went through a really, really rigorous consultation process, and a lot of the community were very happy with what was recommended by staff, and they did an incredible job, and it was supported unanimously by the entire board.
Thank you. Sam?
That's right, yeah. Catherine and I don't usually disagree on many things throughout the council table, but on this one I will. I think we need to be really mindful of when we're taking car parks away in these environments, particularly around the university at the moment and those streets. We get raised with us constantly, and I just can't see why we'd be taking more off at the moment, so I won't support it, which I guess breaks away from the normal practice of adopting the community board's recommendation, but I just can't today.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. So that's Sam and Aaron.
And James.
And James Goff. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. Sorry?
17.
Number 17.
I'm happy to move.
Yeah, well done, Jimmy.
Is it 17? Oh, God.
Review of the
Sorry.
constitution agreement of the committee.
A review of the constituting agreement of the committee for the Canterbury Regional Landfill Joint Committee. And that's moved by Jimmy, seconded by Sam. I'll put that motion.
It's for whether briefly comments.
Oh, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm the chair of the Canterbury Regional, those landfill committee, because you are aware, at the moment, this one committee, not only in Christchurch City, but also including all those surrounding area, even from Ashburton, Honolulu, etc. So for our meeting, particularly after the COVID-19 lockdown, some of them have come to the city far away. So that's why we put on the new one paragraph, even from the person the meeting or from the video, audio, it's more flexible, can include all those members. So that's why we are unanimous in our community meeting to put on this one paragraph. Just want to let you know. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Well done. Look, can I deal with item 21 first? We'll do the Bishopdale Village Mall revitalisation. So if we could just move to item 21, and there's some new wording that's been worked through. Which word? Sorry, what am I looking at? Is it this one? Okay, so this is endorsed continued work by staff to support revitalisation of Bishopdale Village Mall, and it's working with anchor tenants, identifying the relevant processes, costs and opportunities for reconfiguring land ownership. So this is to get that kick-started and to enable that to happen and encourage community-led placemaking measures in partnership with the Enliven Bishopdale Group. And the Fendleton Walmari Herwood Community Board governs the development of this to deliver some quick wins, and milestones and reporting timelines will be influenced by private development and government agency requirements, etc. So does someone want to move that? Aaron, is that in your patch? Aaron, seconded by Sam. Okay, so have anyone got any questions for staff?
I have a question or two. Thank you. So Bishopdale, the focus is on revitalising the retail offering. Is that right?
The focus is on revitalising the core Bishopdale Village Mall area, but that does actually include the links through to the Bishopdale Park, the Elephant Park, as well as the library that we have as the council facility, but also those links to the wider community. This report doesn't explicitly step into that next stage of revitalisation. It just is making recommendations for initial works that do focus in the mall area.
I'm just things like considering the big retail development in Langdons Road, for example, and the different movements of population, they'll be all considered when looking at this?
Yeah, back in 2018, we held some workshops and some stakeholder engagement, but also at the time council did a lot of work around investigating the problem and developing a business case around this revitalisation. One of the key things at that time was Langdons Road coming on board, and that shifting some of the major tenants that were previously in Bishopdale Mall outside of that retail offer, which has now left an oversupply of space in Bishopdale. There's a large footprint of the mall comparative to the size of the catchment population. So one of the things that we need to look at is how does that evolve over time now that there's an excess of commercial space there.
But we own the car park as road reserve, but which creates some challenges as well, which is why the community board's core critical to getting some quick wins in this space. Yeah, who's Melanie and Pauline?
I can't remember where I saw it, under resource implications somewhere, about the cost. You just said it has staff time and then the maintenance, which is between 30 to 150,000. So I was wondering what that's used for and the variance in the amount.
So each year, different elements of the mall come up for maintenance and renewal. The mall was built in the 1960s. Various elements of that were additions in the 90s and some earlier. In some years we don't spend a lot of money out there, and it's just on our sort of road maintenance contract and landscaping, similar to other commercial areas, namely New Brighton and City Mall, that we spend to keep the planter beds maintained. Other years we've had to remove a substantial amount of trees. Ultimately, it was really hard to get a figure for actually what Bishopdale was costing us and where we would be heading into the future. If the car parks were paying a rates revenue to council as well, that figure starts getting substantially higher if it wasn't a council-owned car park facility.
Mm-hmm.
So that figure is on budget. The maintenance figure is on
included
in existing budgets.
Yep.
Thanks.
Pauline.
Can you just tell me about the Enliven Bishopdale group? Is that a council liaison group to liaise with the community, or is it a community group?
So it is a collective of community groups that are funded with support from the community board. So the community board, I believe, gave $30,000 in 2019 to this group, and they have undertaken a number of initiatives, mainly at this stage using some of the community purpose reserve, that was where the old Bishopdale Library was located, to transform that into a more community friendly space with seating, a mural. They're also looking at painting some of the assets that we have there, such as the mall seats, some of the stuff around the playground, and they're looking for ways that they can improve the toilets in Bishopdale on behalf of council. So it's a community-driven group, but definitely our community governance team are core critical in sort of supporting them in their activities.
Well, that's really good model, isn't it? It's a bit similar to what Mike Mora showed us with the reserve up in their area. So it's really good to see these things happening. Thank you.
Good things. Is it? Sorry, did anyone else have a question? Jimmy?
I just don't know, particularly regarding to priority. I remember staff, have a briefing to the councillors, but this one is not high priority, even less than in the church corner, the development one. So why this one bring to the council? What's the rationale?
So the genesis of this report was that the community board asked for reporting back on this. I think we say that at the start of this paper. So this has been, and the chief executive asked us to investigate this. It's important that we identify what council want to do in relation to this area, so that staff can get your endorsement and get on and do the work. But note that this, the resolutions in this report are looking at the short-term, I guess, low-cost opportunities or cost-neutral opportunities that sit with the mall, and any transformative regeneration. The resolutions indicate that that should be part of your decision-making around priorities and how you wish urban regeneration to proceed in the LTP.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so has that been moved and seconded? Yep. And I'll open it up for debate. Aaron?
Yeah, I'd encourage everyone to obviously support this. We're unanimous at community board around this and getting an outcome. This mall's in the heart of my ward. It's a bit of a dunger, I think would be fair to say, the outside areas. The numbers when DCL did the work on this were actually really positive. The average spend per person is really good. So there is a great opportunity sitting here, but like was said, this was developed in the 60s and things have changed a little. The catchment that was shopping there when we were showing the maps is primed for a considerable redevelopment. Myself personally, I'd like to see it become quite boutique. I could imagine something not like, because you potentially do an outdoor and indoor version, but let's have open minds of the tannery. That type of boutique style mall over this side of town would work really, really well. There's a big catchment for it, and the supermarket want to expand. They need more room to do that, so we should be open to selling that land, and we should also be open to the option of, if the other landowners there come to us with a proposal and want to take the land off us, that would put money in the council's coffers and take away the maintenance liability, which at the moment we're only tickling, because there's some really big trees and other things there that are breaking all the guttering edges. You get flooding in winter, the car parking goes the wrong way on the southern car park. I mean, there's a number of problems there that personally, as the local councillor, I don't want to spend council money and council staff time on if someone else wants to come in and take it over, and we can either be a shareholder in a development or we might sell it. But let's be open-minded and see who wants to do what out there, and potentially lower the council's liabilities.
Thank you. I will put the motion. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
While I know that the Community Board are really keen to get something done here, I can't vote in favour of this today. We've got clear evidence in item 20 which shows that the inner city east and New Brighton areas should be the priority for revitalisation, engaging with the community, and businesses in Bishopdale Mall now will raise unrealistic expectations of a boutique-style mall in a time of constrained finances when other areas languish. The report is clear that any transformation will need substantial funding and that we are continually being asked to prioritise our projects. I read from the disadvantages of going ahead on this today that staff resources will be withdrawn from other existing priorities for regeneration, for example the Central City, Linwood Village and Inner City East, which will impact delivery, and that Bishopdale may compete for a limited amount of inward investment and take private sector regeneration focus away from other areas. This may have a negative impact on other centres and the Central City and be contradictory to the community outcomes. So I'm really sorry, and I know that the board were unanimous in this, like the previous board were with the last decision we made, but it's just not a priority for Central Council resources at this time, though there is nothing to stop the board progressing amenity enhancements with its discretionary fund with the community groups in the area.
Well,
no, you go.
well, I was going to begin with the line that I don't often disagree with Sarah Templeton. But on this occasion, I'll follow the trend and speak in favour of the resolution. It has been an enormous sense of frustration to me that we've had 4 of 5 years of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act. This was a place that was crying out for a private sector-led development, and we're the ones that own substantial amounts of the land, and I know that there are challenges with road reserve. What this resolution does is that it endorses the continued work to support revitalisation, but it's through working with anchor tenants on interim small-scale opportunities in the mall and identifying via an investment case the relevant processes, costs and opportunities for reconfiguring land ownership of the car park land. I think that's core critical because it was built in the 60s. I don't remember it being built. I remember Northlands being built and the impact of Northlands on Bishopdale Mall. So, and it is dated. There is too much land, and there are those that are already committed to investing in that area, namely the supermarket, that has significant ambitions, which are matched by a growing population right on the fringe of the airport contours, so noise contours. So I think that, to me, I'd really like to see this proceed. If there is an opportunity to come up with something that doesn't have that financial impact, I believe that this is the opportunity to do it. So I'm very much in support of this recommendation. Andrew.
Thank you. Whilst this has been identified as a lower priority than some other areas, which clearly do need attention, I support this. It's clearly well supported by the Community Board. It's able to be achieved, and it's able to be achieved within existing budgets and resources. And I would encourage that approach because I would take a similar view to Sarah if a proposal was put in front of us for significant additional funding needing to be applied to this area. It's an opportunity to work with the private sector to make the most of opportunities that clearly already exist, to work in collaboration with the community through the Community Board and the Community Governance team, as we've heard. This represents opportunity, gives us the opportunity to see what form that particular opportunity might take, and they're the reasons that I support it.
James Goff.
Thank you. I wasn't planning on debating this because I thought that this was a no-brainer, but hearing some people speak against it, I think just absolutely staggers me and actually embarrasses me as a city councillor. But we're the major landowner here. This is an area that's well supported by the community and well supported by also the community board with the recommendations that we've got here. We've let down this community. It's not like areas that as a city we have high aspirations for, and we can draw pretty pictures and build up expectations and then actually watch them come crashing down because we don't have huge influence here. We have massive influence here. It's one of the few areas where the council is actually the main landowner in a major retail area. We're essentially the mall owner here. You've got tenants, large tenants that are crying out to partner with us. You have a community that is desperate to see the council reinvest in something that it has a duty to. And you look at the private sector, which will reinvest in malls every 5 to 7 years, a major revamp. Nothing has happened from the council. It's an absolute embarrassment. We have the ability to do this within existing budgets. And I've got councillors wanting to vote against it. Absolutely disgusting. We are letting down the community. And we are not holding up our actions as landowners here. So I most certainly endorse the recommendations that we've got here because this community deserves it. And as a responsible landowner, I think it's our duty to do it. And it's not even going to require any additional funding. We can actually partner with people that have got a vested interest and want this place to succeed. And as a local councillor for this area, and as a city councillor for Christchurch, I think that we need to give back to this community, and it's our obligation, not only as city councillors, but as landowners here to do that. So please support the recommendations here. This area has been left to languish for far too long, and there's a tangible way forward with partnerships and support in place across the board to do it. So it's low-hanging fruit.
Yanni.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that in the report, it's quite clear that basically the preferred option isn't the option that will take resources away from other projects that we think is priorities. So, for me, that's kind of really important, and I hear that people have raised concern about that, but actually I thought the approach we're adopting doesn't do that. We are going to, under 3, look at that as part of the LTP. So I'm happy to support this. I think this is exactly what council should be doing, and we shouldn't penalise one area that's happening ahead of others if we're not doing it in other areas. What we should do is recognise that other areas where we also have similar opportunities, we should be doing a similar thing. Mm-hmm. Like Phillipstown, we own Lancaster Park, huge piece of land, right? Let's get on and take a coordinated approach. Linwood, I've sent you the email from earlier today around the number of projects that we've got going on and the ability to actually get something a lot better because of the sum of the parts rather than a whole bunch of individual projects. So I actually think that this is a good approach. We have actually put a library in Bishopdale, which has been quite good. So it's not like we haven't invested in this area, but working out what we do with this mall, I think is really critical. And I think this is a really good way forward. So I'm not, as someone who represents areas where things need to be done, I'm not convinced that this project will take away from those areas. And I think this is actually the right approach. And I think we should look at extending it to other parts of the city that need it.
Mike.
Thank you. Look, I'll happily support this motion. It makes sense, but I do want to point out to one of the councillors, it's very clear in this report that actually it will impact the delivery of the regeneration projects in Central City, Linwood Village and Inner City East.
James Daniels.
No, there's a different section.
I'm not grumpy, James. I am supporting this because it would be churlish on one level to not support revitalisation. But the main point for me was made by the Deputy Mayor, which is that that it's not going to, it's on budget already, as I understand it. So, it's a no-brainer for me too. Kia ora.
Kia ora. All right, I'll put them... Oh, sorry, Sam. Sorry. I didn't realise that was an indication. Thank you.
I agree with what both James and Aaron have said as local councillors, but I think the key thing that's been missed from this, and I was quite surprised that Councillor Templeton won't be supporting it, was the real focus on it being led by the community board. And that the whole idea of this is for it to be a local project, far more efficient and driven locally. And so when we can self-fund it through private development, tidy it all up and have it run through a community board, to me it seems like a real no-brainer. So I would urge people to support it.
All right, I shall put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
That's carried. Sarah
Oh,
Templeton.
I got a lot of
opposed.
debate out of that.
So that brings us to lunchtime. So I will adjourn the meeting until 2 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, right, we'll get the meeting back underway. Thank you very much. And we're going to skip the urban regeneration priorities and come back to that because it might take a little bit longer than the other two. So I'm just going to start at number 22, which are miscellaneous amendments to council delegations, and we have some changes. Have you got the changes there? Well, there's a change. Oh, you've talked to the. Do you know about the change? No. Sorry, but what are you moving?
Just the stuff, the paper.
So, but I'd like you to consider the proposal because I wasn't going to see the necessity to take it as an amendment if people agreed to it. Sarah's picked up the fact that the removal of trees from the residential red zone would be a delegation to staff, not through the community board, but we've had a good conversation about what it's all about, and it is specifically for the purposes of ecological restoration, land drainage improvement or flood protection, and now the community board and the transformative governance group to be informed of any removals prior to being carried out under this delegation. So we're actually making the delegation, but it's a lot more. It's got some parameters around it. Yeah. So if you're moving it, Jake, are you comfortable with that? Right. And who was the seconder? Sorry, I missed that. Tim. Right. Okay. Are there any questions for staff? Yes, Anne.
Yes. Thank you. Just with the disposal of land where there is no immediate identified alternative public use or work. At the moment, our way, we've got land that is excess to requirements, and we had a report come to community board that outlined that and that it would be sold, and we had a bit of a uprising amongst some that it should have been that the community should have been asked if there was any if they believed there was any reason to hang on to it. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the process, how we address that going forward in terms of this, what's proposed here.
Yeah, so this relates to land that where we've had to buy more than's required for the specific project.
Yes.
And often that's around drainage reserves or potentially transport work, those kind of projects. Generally that's funded from the specific project itself, and we're trying to get the balance of the extra money that we've been paid for the land back into that project as quick as possible to deliver the project's outcomes. We would certainly look and work through with all internal units to see whether there are any plans, including particularly funded plans, and with strategies that relate to possible uses of that land. That's what we were proposing. But we wouldn't be consulting with the community about whether there's additional there, because we haven't acquired that land specifically for a community purpose. It's really only for generally the infrastructure purpose that we've acquired it for.
So the feeling was that given the growth out our way, that there would be an opportunity to use that land to build a community facility, for example, and that it should be put aside for future use. So how do we, it's difficult because there is actually going to be need, and we do have land there that's excess to what we need at the moment, but future growth may mean that we'll need it. So I guess I'm asking, where does the community have is there any opportunity? I know that you go around each of the different teams and you say, look, do you need this? And if you do, you take responsibility for it. But community doesn't seem to be involved in that process, and should they?
This is very specific land.
I
so
know.
It's like buying a property and not needing all of it for the widening of the road or whatever.
And that's exactly the situation, but the community board have picked up on the fact that this land could be useful in the future, even though it's all about that. Absolutely, and I'm, perfectly comfortable with that land being sold and the money being put back in. But there are community board members who feel aggrieved that they weren't considered in this.
But the money that's utilised to purchase the land is for a project.
Exactly.
And so why should that project then generate a different use? I mean, it's a different issue. I would agree with you in terms of, and we'll have a quick chat about that in the next paper, in relation to existing properties that we've had for a purpose. This has been purchased, so it's been purchased for a road widening, or it's been purchased for a specific purpose, and the money's on budget from that project. That money should be returned to that project.
I agree, totally.
They bought the whole lot, so they need that.
Oh no, exactly.
Yeah.
But the community board, there's a bit that they don't need, and so they're going to sell it to the developer. And the community is saying, why shouldn't council hang on to it and use for the community? So, and the money that it's sold for will go back into that project. I totally get it. I understand completely. But what I'm saying is the community board has seen it as perhaps an investment for the future.
It's a potentially a way forward to try and keep this process as efficient as possible, and not adding too much time to it, would be that we would circulate, before exercising this delegation, in an informal way, information to the boards, so that they can say, yes, there's potential that then would trigger a more formal process, or no, just get on and dispose of it, whether that would address your concern.
Well, I think the whole council would want to have a say on whether money that was set aside for a project should not be have that project money reduced by if possible. So
If the community wanted to retain that bit of land that was for a project, they would have to find the money to buy it.
yeah. But anyway, Dawn.
So, Mayor and members, I think, Pauline, you just hit the nail on the head in reality. So there are safeguards in this delegation, and it clearly states it. And I think that's the thing I would like you to focus on as well, because this is about what you as councillors decide, recognising the interests that the community boards may or may not have. You have purchased for a purpose, it becomes surplus to requirements. If you choose to decide to keep it and not sell it on to bring the project cost back down, it says clearly in here, it must meet an identified need. It must be supported by a sound business case. It absolutely should meet our council strategy, and it must be able to be funded. And I suppose that's the underlying fundamental issue. Otherwise, we will continue to grow our cost, our OPEX, our capital costs, without an understanding of the implications of that. And I think that's the message that really does need to go back to the community boards.
So perhaps if we could communicate that. I mean, I know that staff meet with the community board chairs. If this could be reported to them, and if an item could go on the agenda of the community board meeting, so that they've all received that information, so that they're very clear about what this decision's about.
And I support the prospect of what Bruce suggested, which is, we can, before anything happens, at least give information. But in reality, this is your decision.
Yeah,
I think that would be very good. I think the concern has been that from my point of view, watching on, is that this report has come to our community board twice and be left on the table, which means it holds up the whole thing.
Yeah.
So there might be a better way of doing it.
Yeah. Yanni.
I mean, it's pretty unlikely within 2 weeks that a community board can get a sound, robust business case and establish funding in an annual plan or an LTP if they want to do something on the site. So I do think it's kind of, the safeguards are not really there. So I was just wondering, like, if there was another stage in the process, which would be actually circulating around to the community board, or maybe putting it on the area report for an indication.
This is not land that we've held for years and years and years. It's land we've purchased for a purpose that we had to purchase more of in order to get the bit of land that we needed. That's all it's referring to. I mean, I totally agree around the broader issue about seeking community advice as to what alternative use land could be before it's actually declared a surplus.
So if one department acquires it for that purpose, I get that, and they need it, and they do what they're going to do. But, you know, take properties around, like, say, a river or through an area plan where you might actually want a cycleway or a shared path. You might actually want something additional that's not actually part of the original project, but actually makes sense to do it while you've got that land. And that's all. So I was just wondering what the process is around identifying what other opportunities may be, rather than the sort of detailed stuff in here, which, you know, it says retaining the property for an alternative public use or work must. It puts a whole bunch of stuff that's actually not realistic.
That's right. This delegation only applies where there is no immediate identified alternative public use or work. So that doesn't trigger the requirement. What will mean, what it's signalling to staff is that in order to bring that to council, they have to establish a clearly identified need, be supported by a sound and robust business case, support council strategies, and be provided for with established funding. So, I mean, to me, this is the most sensible of the delegations. It's
You'll never get it.
so. Yep.
But the community board, I'm just reflecting what their conversation that we had with our community.
Very good.
We will certainly, before exercising, and in this case because we're recommending it's a delegation to the CE because it's such an important one, but before we go through all units, and I would say that the CE, I don't know many who, if they heard concerns from a community board, would then rush to use that. They would be listening and listening to that feedback. So I think that besides the safeguards there are informal safeguards over the top of that. That means there won't be any rushed decisions on these.
So it still goes through the normal process of being circulated around the different units of council
Absolutely.
to see if there was a need.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Which is what I was.
Might help.
So just to move on. I was just looking at on page 193 the applications for community funding, and it just says applications to the Innovation and Sustainability Fund. That's just not a sustainability fund. That's all I have to say.
Sorry. Okay.
It's very unusual.
I think even seriously
Right. Okay. So we just need to change the name of the fund. Can you do that?
Sorry, what?
It's not called the Innovation and Sustainability Fund anymore. It's just called the Sustainability Fund.
Oh, right, Joe's got that.
Yeah, and it's it's just the heading, the two headings. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded. Any debate? I'll put Yanni.
So I was just wondering if you can put the tree delegations separately. So particularly on page 189.
This is the amendment.
Yeah, well, sorry, I know.
So it's been amended.
So the delegation still exists, and it just gets referred to the community board.
Yeah, prior to exercising
I'm just mindful
the
of
delegation.
coming from the Red Zone meeting where a number of people in the community raised concerns about the large number of trees being removed from the Red Zone, and I just...
This is for the restoration of the spine. I mean, look...
Sorry, I don't... So...
We'll put
if
it
we
separately.
don't change it, it would go community board.
That's
so
fine.
I don't want to support it just being delegated away.
Yep, no, that's fine.
Cheers.
Okay.
I just want my vote.
All right, so I'll put the tree delegation amendment, which has been significantly amended since we received the paper. So I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
That's carried. Yanni. And the balance of the resolution, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. The next item is the Cecil Place. Oh, he's got a very good answer. And there was a question that I understand staff will address, but do you want to present the question, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. No, I alluded to this earlier on when we had the chair of the community board in front of us. I was just concerned that the process of taking this through the community board, whether that had been followed correctly. Now, I've been informed informally in the meantime that it was affected by the COVID-19 provisions. But was just keen to know that the process had been followed correctly, or as correctly as possible in the circumstances. And I mean, maybe if you're able to articulate what normally would happen and what did happen in this case, just so that we can be comfortable, first of all, with allowing this to happen today in the way that's proposed, but secondly, that we can be comfortable that the correct processes normally would be followed.
Excuse me. So some of you may recall that the process that's been followed here in this specific example was one that we used up until about 2 years ago. And then upon feedback from the relevant community boards, we implemented a slightly different process where each community board would be provided with a list of properties that within their ward that the council no longer requires for a public work, and then the community board would have an opportunity to make individual recommendations on those properties back through to staff, and then it would go through a process on an individual basis. And in some scenarios you may have got a large report that identified all the properties, and with each one had an individual recommendation. Prior to that, we would send out an individual property memorandum, which would include a brief overview of the property, a property plan, a property location. That would go to the community board. Set in running parallel to that, it would also be sent to the executive, who would then filter it down through to the various levels of council, and we would then take the information from that and present a report to council. Because of the situation that we found ourselves in earlier this year, with community boards weren't meeting because of COVID-19, it seemed to be a practical sense to revert to the prior process that we utilised. And so because of that, the property memorandum was sent through to the community board in May, asking if there had any alternative public work suggestions. And I think, as Dawn said earlier, the ideas needed to be supported by a sound business case and funded. In this particular scenario, there were no suggestions came back, no queries came back, no questions came back, and accordingly this report ends up here today.
So we're making an assumption that the community board are comfortable with this, in as much as nobody raised anything when they received that memo, and we can be comfortable that the process that was put in place 2 years ago would still be followed correctly in situations that weren't affected by COVID as this was in May.
Absolutely, and there's been one report since then, probably went to the Papanui Innes board, around the disposal of excess land at 548 Marshlands Road, that just showed that would be the normal process that we would have done there. Still on an ad hoc basis for these ones, rather than the omnibus approach of the properties for review process.
All right, thank you very much.
I've got Melanie and Pauline.
Can we get a copy of that process that is now, because I just can't find it on the hub, and I've got a printed copy somewhere floating at home, but I would like to be able to refer to it when I need to.
No problem at all.
Yeah. Pauline?
Yeah. Look, it seems to me that we've got 3 different scenarios, possibly at least, with land disposal. One of them is when we've had a historical piece of land that's been sitting there and it needs to be disposed of. Another one is where we purchase as part of a project, and knowing that we're purchasing too much, and knowing that we're going to release the balance. And the third one is the social housing, which is this one. So surely, can you tell me that, I'm wondering why this would actually require the same process as a historical piece of land that's surplus to requirements, because the social housing land sits in a ring-fenced fund. Therefore, how can a community board even contemplate using it for anything else.
Yeah. So I think that the complex answer, and I'll try and keep it brief and just focus on really the key point, which seems to be the social housing matter.
Yes.
We're treating the social housing the same as any other council land. The only difference in the case would be if you did find an alternative use for social housing, the approach we've taken in the past, or you as the elected members have taken in the past, is if there is an alternative use for housing land, you compensate the housing fund so you protect that rates neutrality. And the prime example would be the residential red zone compensation for those complexes lost in the earthquake, where funds ended up in consolidated funds, and then over time you've made decisions to recompense the housing fund to make up for those that were taken into the consolidated funds. So in this case, if you found an alternative use for the land, housing would be looking to get a compensation so that we could then reinvest that
Back into the
lifting the standard of the rest of the stock.
Right, and that's part of the resolution too, that any sales money from the sales goes back into the fund.
Yep.
Thank you.
Right. Sarah and Yanni? Sorry. Sarah, Sam, Yanni?
Thanks. I was just appreciate in terms of council, like there's not a lot of need for this land. I understand that, but just in terms of like the Brougham Street corridor and also the things around home, the home equity programs that have been looked at through Habitat for Humanity. Was any discussion had with either NZTA or with Habitat or government around the home equity idea or the transport needs?
Relating to this, we did look at some transport. There were some earlier indications when we looked at that closely, but no ongoing transport. In terms of the progressive home ownership, in terms of the progressive home ownership scheme, there are no providers yet identified in Christchurch, so there's nobody to talk to yet, but that's certainly on our radar for other sites. Really important one. I was meeting with Kayanga Ora yesterday and talking through and seeing, making sure that that's on their radar and that we're on their radar as well for those shared ownership, shared equity, affordable products. So yes, whether this site's suitable, it's probably not. They've got such a concentration down that area, down that Brougham Street corridor and in that broader area of social housing that we don't think that that's sensible in the short term, and especially when we've got other sites such as the Carey Street or Andrews Crescent sites that would be more suitable for development.
Just, I think in the past when we've agreed to sort of look at property disposal, we have kind of flagged, so if you take Habitat for Humanity, so I'm not talking about social housing, I was more talking about the ability for Habitat, for example, with that shared equity scheme that we've set up to develop the site. Is there any way that we could, if we agree as council today to say, look, we don't want to retain it, we want to look at, disposing of it, that we could talk through whether it would be suitable for home equity?
Yeah, happy to notify them of that if council makes that decision that it's surplus and it's going to dispose of it.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I don't know how other councillors feel. I haven't seen the sort of detailed plans for Brougham Street. I know we've had a kind of high level thing and there was talk of a whole bunch of improvements, but it did seem to me that there's possibly an opportunity to work with NZTA around, if we go through the disposal, protecting some of the frontage, either with trees and also with other, a wider shared path or something like that. So I don't know how we incorporate that into today, but yeah, I just wanted to flag those two.
So I've got it moved and seconded, so yeah, I'll open it up for debate. Sorry?
Could I make a note?
What's your amendment?
Well, it was just to ask staff to consider as part of the disposal process any opportunity with Habitat for Humanity or similar home equity scheme, and also to discuss with NZTA around any parts of the land that may be identified for the use in the Brougham corridor.
That's a really unusual noting provision.
We're happy to do that on an informal basis and follow up with those. So, absolutely. We don't need to have a resolution of that.
I don't want to hold up the process.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just.
So you could have it as a note if you wished.
No, seriously, I'm unhappy with the idea of putting down the name of a provider in a resolution, even if it's just a noting resolution. Right, okay.
I'll just do it. Yeah, don't need a note.
All right. So.
It doesn't prevent it from being disposed, it just enables, if there's any community benefit to those discussions, that the staff have those before it goes through.
So like all these things, you're going to weigh, aren't you, the issue of what you can get in value terms around price and what the additional benefit and what that might impact on price.
It is very challenging in the middle of a meeting without any consideration being given to, sort of informing me so that I'm able to assist in the wording of a suitable noting provision. It's very difficult to manage a meeting, and I'm going to get to the point where I'm simply going to adjourn these meetings so that we can come up with proper wording that we can consider. So, yes, I understand that you're fine with it, but if Councillor Johansson is asking for the resolution to be amended, I cannot ignore him.
I think staff have given the feedback. So.
Thank you. Right, I'll open it up for debate. Phil.
Thank you very much. Guys, I think take the likes of this piece of land. Poor old Bruce has been paying rates on this for 10 years. And the process we've got of getting rid of stuff is archaic. We had one 3 or 4 months ago, Huxley Street I think it was, and it took him 4 years to get it in front of us. And it was only one section with a state house on it. We've got land lying around all over the place which is surplus, and we should, if it's definitely surplus, just get rid of it as quick as we can, because we're paying for it, and to make life easier and trying to make the process quicker to get rid of this stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. What's the item? Item 20, urban regeneration priorities. So, there's been an issue that's just I've been trying to sort of focus my mind on what it is that that I would like to see in the resolutions, because I mean the issues around endorsing prioritisation in this financial year, that's really good. But in relation to the central city, I really do think that we need to call out the fact that we're still awaiting a progress report on outcomes delivered by the Central City Action Plan and the residential program project 8011 to date, coupled with a proposed update to the plans in light of the impacts of COVID-19. So we know that work's being done. And we know that COVID-19 has impacted on the reporting of progress and the actual updated plan, but it's coming through the stream of work, so it'll come to the Momentum Committee. I was hoping sooner than October, but it's 3 or 4 weeks away. and then it will come to council. So hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. But I'd rather than specifically call out these things, I would rather note that the council is expecting to receive a progress report on them and an update in relation to the impacts of COVID-19. So that councillors know that there's a process in place and that that they will be looking at a revised, refreshed, really, Central City Action Plan in the very near future. Is that all right? Yeah. Cool. All right, so do I have any questions for Pauline?
Yeah, so thanks for this, and I know that we've workshopped it, but I have felt a little bit uncomfortable about the areas that are being left out. And is it fair to say that this is potentially the demise of the master plan funding, looking into the future? So I believe the suburban master plan funds are sitting in the LTP somewhere. To bring this through, are we actually going to be, say Edgeware, would the master plan funding would disappear from there because it's not prioritised, therefore the funding would go somewhere else?
So the decisions about what is funded where for particular capital projects are decisions of council when you consider the LTP.
Yes, but you make the recommendations. So, I mean, my question is, that's potentially at risk in this process.
Well, I would note that apart from the three areas that you're endorsing for the current year, that decisions that you will make in the LTP will include the master plan funding that is already in the 10-year horizon,
yeah,
and the work on any subsequent priorities won't be done until you make decisions about where your priority areas are in the LTP. So funding for those priority areas will come through in subsequent LTPs, and you'll be able to make the on-balance judgment call about where you want to actually put whatever funding you would have available in that time frame.
Okay, so I mean, in Resolution 8, you know, the council may consider priorities for capital budgets currently allocated to the 9 suburban master plans in the LTP. But, you know, my question here is by agreeing to these being a priority, we're effectively agreeing to the other ones being kind of not important. And that puts me in a difficult situation with Edgeware that does require a lot of revitalisation, but they push their master plan work back because of the incredible number of disruptive roadworks for infrastructure, and then the cycleway came through and the businesses were on the verge of closing. So they're kind of going to end up being a casualty if we don't somehow look after these other areas that are not in the priority space.
This is Resolution 5 listing them. I mean, is Resolution 5 required? I mean, it's a noting provision, and whereas what we're really doing today is endorsing the heat map approach, you know, giving that the priority, and then endorsing the prioritisation of the following locations in FY 2021. So that's what we're doing with this paper, and that's just for this this financial year.
Yep.
And I agree with that, to focus on the few for the biggest
bang for buck.
Bang for buck, yeah. Not quite so effective these days.
It's not.
To say, you know, that, I mean, is it necessary to have the noting provision? Because then that requires us to have a discussion about these issues now, and it might be better to come back with a more considered view on that once we've done the activity management plan.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that. We just stick with the heat map as a more, rather than naming them out, you mean individually.
Yeah.
Caroline, do you have a...
Well, yes, we're just discussing the the recommendation is simply a noting recommendation. Those priorities emerge from the heat map evidence that we've you've had presented to you. So that's the basis for those sitting in the report.
But as
there
you
is
say,
no compulsion
it's
for council to actually accept that advice.
No, I know,
You may
but
receive other advice and new layers of information, particularly in relation to COVID-19, that might, when you come to look at that in the LTP, that might change your perspective. It's
yeah. I mean, I think getting the endorsement for the heat map approach is the key of this paper. Actually having a debate around all of the individual projects that sit within the bigger debate that we're going to have around the LTP. It isn't necessary for this paper to proceed and to achieve its objective, but I'm just suggesting that that's one way of enabling this paper to progress readily. But
because I also had questions about it, Old Takaro Avon River Corridor that's already heavily funded from multi-streams, and should that be funded from
that's
this?
the debate that I don't want
That's
us to
right, so
have,
that might be the...
because we've got a bigger debate to have around the LTP, so I'm just trying to get it, I'm trying to read the mood of the room.
Well, my mood is just to move for all the staff recommendations as they stand.
I don't see any problem with leaving that there as it sits. It's just noting, and at least it records the work that we did in those workshops, which must have some sort of value, realising it's all subject to LTP decision making anyway.
So that, and you don't want to change it to a noting provision about the progress reports and the development of the no, that's not right either. Yeah.
I'm happy with 4A noting, but I don't, on paragraph 5, I don't see it.
Yeah, but the 4A noting isn't what I wanted. What I wanted was that we're expecting a progress report on the outcomes of the residential program and the it's actually the outcomes of the Central City action plan and the residential program, and that the Central City action plan is being updated to reflect the impacts of COVID-19.
Can I suggest that perhaps to simplify that noting, you simply say, noting that the council is expecting to receive a progress report on the Central City Action Plan, and actually take the detail out, because the detail actually exists inside the action plan.
And that's what I thought, and I didn't want to go through each individual project until we've actually sat as a council and considered it. Right. Good. You good with that? So that's moved by Jake, seconded by Melanie. Right. Well, are there any more questions? Yeah, Yanni.
Just under 5.3, I was just trying to understand how those are incorporated in the prioritisation.
Can you just be explicit when you say 5.3?
Oh, right, okay, cool. So, like, for example, I note, like, in particular, there was strong alignment in community board plans. It mentions Linwood Park and Eastgate, and as a coherent, a whole community board priority. We've just had the board come earlier today and raise it. We've had a resolution through the annual plan and the LTP going back each year for the last 2 years, but it's not listed as a priority in terms of doing stuff now when we're actually spending the money. So I was just, I guess, trying to understand what the constraints were to actually bringing something like that forward, given that money's being spent there right now as we speak. And if we leave it a year, we've probably lost the opportunity to do what would maximise the benefit.
Sorry, which one's this?
5.3.
5.3 point what?
No, 5.3.
5.3.1.
Right.
It says there's strong alignment to the community board plans, and it mentions
Inner
Linwood
City
Park
East
and the Eastgate Activity Centre. But if you go to the recommendations, they put that one as a lower priority. to be considered through the preparation of long-term plan, even though we're actually spending money there now.
Sorry, I thought that. Sorry, Linwood Village Inner City East. They're in this year.
Yeah, I'm talking about 5C on page 134. So I just wondered if there was an opportunity to bring that one forward, given that we're spending money there now. And I've just seen the last house has just been removed last week from the park, and it's been identified through this and previous resolutions.
So Councillor Johansson is referring to Linwood Eastgate as opposed to Linwood Village Inner City East. And the report is clear that if you want to bring forward a piece of work in another part of the city, then something has to give, because we only have sufficient resource to undertake the priorities as we've set out in the resolution 4. There's only so many pieces of work that staff can work on and achieve the outcomes and the momentum that you're wishing to achieve. I'd also note that that 4A, B and then C came through as priority areas or priority initiatives, with the heat map as the basis, as the evidence base, as higher priority than Linwood Eastgate.
Yeah.
But we're spending the money now, so we lose the opportunity if we don't do it.
Yeah, Yanni, that I think it's asked and answered. We can debate that.
Well, can I ask what the cost of doing that one would be? Just that one discreetly?
Yanni, are you talking about the park or the Eastgate bit?
Both.
So it's listed as Eastgate Activity Centre, but it should be park.
Yeah, because my understanding was that the work with the Linwood Park and the pool development was with parks rather than urban regen, because it's the park development and sitting in those budget lines rather than the revitalisation stuff. Yeah.
At a high level, we've got 5 different projects happening in this area without any coordinated spatial planning, which is such a lost opportunity. You've got the bus shelter that's been put in and the landscaping and the Buckley's Road improvement. You've got the park, you've got the pool, you've got...
this is absolutely what I didn't want to do with this paper. So, but that's okay. You're entitled to raise the questions of staff at this stage. And if we can finish the questions, then we'll move to the debate. All right, we'll finish the questions.
So what's the cost to doing that?
Carolyn can't answer that question. She doesn't have
It's
that
not a
information
proposal in the
available.
paper. And the park one's not even on their budget, so it's not their project.
So perhaps it's helpful to note that when we are referring to Linwood Eastgate, as noted in 5C, that's the key activity centre. So that's looking at the broader area as opposed to the points that Councillor Johansson's making about the pool, the park, and perhaps some transport.
I get that. So if you go to 5.3.1 on page 138, which actually makes a lot of sense. So that's something that's been raised as a priority, and it said that there's strong alignment to it. So if it's going to happen anyway, it's going to happen. Fine, that's cool. But I would hate for these resolutions to actually put it back a year if there's already council resolutions to do it, and there's another unit of council that's actually doing that work.
Mel.
My question is one I know the answer to, and we all do. How did these 3 priority areas come about?
Actually,
the 3 that are for this year. Yeah. So the heat map work that you've seen identifies key places where there's a greater coloration in the map. And of those places, we've also had feedback from councillors and community boards as to what priorities they see as well. So I guess it's a combination of the information that we have that is the evidence base, and then on top of that your political views that have informed that as well.
So we had a couple of workshops on this and came up with these priority areas as a council.
And that's shown in attachment A to the report.
Was the fun doc game, remember that?
No, I'm not saying I remember this, I'm making the point.
She is making the point that we've had workshops on this, and it's very clear. It's very clearly spelt out in the paper that these workshops have occurred. But you know, but anyway, we can move on to the debate now. So I'll open it up, Pauline.
Oh yeah, look, just very quickly, it is very hard to argue with the heat map that we've all participated in, and using the social, economic and environmental measures and creating those heat maps. But when you're on the losing end of the stick, it's very hard to actually agree with it either. But what I will support this today, but actually going forward to keep an eye on equity, or amount of equity that going into some of the areas like Edgware Village that haven't been nominated as priorities, of making sure that there are some easy wins and easy improvements and easy gains for the community there that we can try and bring through in the LTP if possible. I just don't want to lose sight of those areas completely, because I mean the heat map is the heat map, but it may be a little bit cut and dried for my liking. And when you've got an area that's activated, motivated, capable, like Edgware, I know that there's good community activation in there, and if we can support that in some way to improve the amenity there, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that too. Thank you.
Melanie?
I think this is really good. I mean, the heat map is, the whole point of it is to put our focus into areas that are not being necessarily focused on at the moment by putting deprivation as one of the priorities, and sometimes we forget about that, and we've got councillors here often talk about Linwood and places in the east that don't get enough attention, and that's why we're supporting this. And I don't think it means we're forgetting about other areas. I've got a master plan in my area as well that was going ahead and now isn't going ahead, and who knows what will happen with it too. So I think we all probably feel the same, but I think in principle this is really good work and we should be supporting it because we came up with it together.
Jake, and well, you're going to close the debate, aren't you? So you don't care, or okay, well, far away, Jake, and then Andrew.
That processes like this are really tough when you have single member wards, and that's why we really just have to set the experts in a robust process that we've all bought into, and that's all we can do.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think the heat map approach is a good one. And it's good to see that the work that we did in workshops some time ago now landing in at least a pathway to some action. Talk of the suburban master plans is always interesting. In many places, those suburban master plans were adopted some time ago. The work was actually commissioned and started in the 2010 term of council, and the adoption of the first of those master plans, Littleton and Sydenham, was back in 2013. So that's now 7 years ago. Some of the master plans have delivered what was envisaged. Some have delivered projects, but without achieving the big picture vision. And some haven't perhaps delivered quite so much at all. Some of the outstanding master plan actions will remain relevant, and some will definitely not be as relevant as they were, or perhaps thought to be, at the time the plans were adopted. And it's interesting to reflect that in the time since 2012, when co-development of the plans was underway with communities, of course, we've recovered from just recovering from an earthquake to recovering from earthquakes, from floods, from fires, from a terror attack, and now from COVID. And we're taking a very different view of the priority and the importance of resilience and of climate change than we did back then as well. So it should therefore come as no surprise that our priorities, and probably the priorities of our communities, may well have changed since 2012, 2013. And of course, all of this is a question for the priorities that we take as we work through the development of the LTP, as to how we might deal with and prioritise any outstanding actions from those master plans, and how they reflect today's priorities rather than the priorities at the time the master plan was developed. But as regards the decision making today, I agree with the process and the way that we've arrived at the heat map priorities, and I agree with the result. I agree that we should be getting on with what we can in these areas in terms of regeneration, in terms of activation, and in terms of progress, and that's what this paper does. And then I agree that we should be considering the further priorities for future work as part of the LTP, along with consideration of how this work might best be delivered, not only in line with community aspirations, but in full cooperation and partnership with communities and community boards, and in fact with the private sector, as we saw in Bishopdale, where opportunities are present. So I'm supportive of this. I'm particularly supportive of getting some work underway as soon as possible in areas that I know will benefit from it. At the same time, keeping sight of other areas where there's still a need for activation and for intervention, and where there may well be opportunities we haven't quite managed to unlock yet.
Jimmy?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, in principle, I fully support this one because I particularly remember the staff present to us based on the list of heat map. We have those prioritized, etc. But I particularly impressed is the staff recommendation, paragraph 8. Still flexible because why we still need to review how much budget for our long-term plan, 2021 to 31, etc. That's a kind of flexible. The other one is not only limited with these priorities, because why, like Andrew mentioned earlier, actually all those kind of the suburban center that's in relation to the earthquake, but now our situation probably has been a change. We already passed through those the in response the stage and also recovery stage. Now we enter into the regeneration stage. When I remember last time we particularly when those the church corner those should be a part of the kind of the suburban development as well, because it's miserable, the vulnerable the place, But I agree also here consider community board plan the priority also can infuse to refresh, I think that's very crucial and important. Yeah.
Thank you. Yanni?
Thank you. I appreciate this approach. I think the heat mapping exercise is really good. But I do get a bit frustrated that, we heard earlier today from one of the community boards that we're going to dig up the same street 3 times. And this is kind of what we're going to do in Linwood Park. We're going to have the same similar contractors that are building the pool, that could build a pavilion, that could do civil works on a park, and that are removing the temporary village. It just seems crazy that we don't get synergy. We've repeatedly had resolutions through council, and I find it extraordinary that resolutions of a council, a democratically elected council that has made decisions to get things done, can just not be actioned or brought back to us in a timely fashion. These things around Linwood Eastgate were raised over 2 years ago, agreed by council 2 years ago to get a report bringing the synergy around these key projects. So to have a report today that says it's not a priority for this year when that work is underway, I just can't accept. I think it's crazy. It's completely wasteful to be having these separate projects going ahead in the same piece of land when you could get much better cost-effective interventions that could really lift up a community. So, I appreciate the heat mapping exercise. I think it's really good. It's identified areas as a priority, and we have had workshops, but the information we're missing is the actual cost of doing each of these and what the budget implications are. It actually wouldn't be a lot for someone to come up with a spatial plan for the Linwood area based on the work that's currently in progress and is actually forecast to happen in the near future. So I don't see that should be a lower priority and put into next year, because we would have lost the opportunity to do it, and we don't want to have to go back further on and spend more money when we could be actually doing it now. So fundamentally, I think this is a good approach, but it does kind of miss the fact that there's some quick win opportunities that we could be putting in place with a little bit more collaboration.
Thank you. All right, I'll just quickly close it off because I won't speak for long because I don't. I'm happy with where we've got to. I think it focuses on the central city, Linwood Village, inner city east, which picks up your Phillips towns and places close to the city that require urgent attention, and any community housing projects that are partnership opportunities for regeneration identified within the heat map priority location. So the heat map's a really great tool which will enable the council to look critically at the priorities that we set. So I think it's very good from that point of view. My disquiet sits around the lifting of community expectations, which was really the result of the master planning, the suburban centre master plan process, which, as Yanni quite rightly identified, didn't have budgets associated with it, and didn't have the land ownership, the land holding and the buy-in from the private sector that would have enabled some of those things to be co-invested with the private sector. And you know, that was it was always, it was an unfortunate phrasing of the master planning, or the use of the words, because it created a community expectation that their plans were able to be delivered, but actually they need more than that. They need real private sector money, and they do need to have the City Council with utilising the tools that it has had for the last 4 years and reducing under a year to go. But so that was my concern in that regard. I think that with the work that we're doing with Christchurch NZ and the sort of broader thinking about how we empower communities to get involved in regeneration planning themselves, and then invite capital in to support that process, that's what I hope to be able to establish in the time that we have remaining in this term. So I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. So the next item is the resolution to exclude the public, which I will move, and I will, and noting that Joanna Norris, Paul Silk, Therese Arsenault will remain after the public have been excluded for item 29, and all the reasons for the resolution set out on the relevant pages of the agenda. So I'll move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Mike Davidson. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried.